Hey, everybody, welcome again. Once again, we're going to do another episode of the Mausner Graham Injury Law Firm podcast. He's Eric Mausner. I'm Bruce Silverman. Eric, in a previous episode, we talked about your background, humble beginnings, growing up in New Jersey, all the way through law school, working in Brooklyn and Manhattan at the same time, getting your experience there, then coming down to Florida and working in the state attorney's office, then making the move into private practice, working with a personal injury firm, and then going out on your own. Have I summarized our first episode and the first 30 some odd years of your life?
Just about.
Okay, good. So now we'll move on. You go out on your own. You decide to be a personal injury attorney. You go to work for a firm. You get more experience in that. What was the motivation for you to go from a firm to being a solo practitioner?
It's a good question. It's one of those things that probably just happened. So I worked for a personal injury firm for a year. They were very established, and we ended up parting ways. I was working on railroad personal injury law. Actually, it was a very niche area of the law, and I can honestly say it was not for me. I wanted to be more of a general personal injury lawyer. I wanted to handle a wide variety of PI cases, and that was very niche. So decided we moved on from that, and then I ended up interviewing and looking at other opportunities at other firms in South Florida. Quickly realized most of them weren't the right fit for me, and then I started to have the entrepreneurial bug. So I met a lawyer who runs his own mass tort firm, and mass torts are dangerous drugs and defective medical device cases. They're kind of similar to class actions, but they're different from class actions because they're not economic in nature, and not everybody's situated differently. They're injury cases, and everybody has their own measure of damages. That's why they're called mass torts, and they're federal court cases, and they get consolidated in one federal court around the country, and there's leadership teams. There's a whole process I won't go into. So I went to work for a lawyer that does mass torts, and he basically said, manage my business, you'll learn mass torts and start your own. And that's what I did. So I was about 5 years into law, and I decided to start my own business while I was working with another lawyer.
And what would you say is the biggest difference between being a prosecutor and being a PI attorney?
There's major differences, but I mean, to start with similarities, prosecutors represent victims, or technically they represent the community, right? But they do represent victims. They give a voice to victims of crime. Personal injury lawyers also do that. We represent victims, injury victims, victims of crime, victims of negligence, right? You give these people a voice in court. You make sure they get justice. So I think there's a lot of similarities. Prosecutors, a burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Personal injury lawyer also has a burden of proof, preponderance of the evidence, a lower standard. Coming up as a prosecutor, you have a lot of good training for personal injury because it's litigation and trial work. You learn how to present the case. You learn how to think about evidence in a lot of ways. Lawyers who don't have that experience don't necessarily think of it. Don't come from that background. They have different training, right? They may have to learn that over time. So I think those are the similarities. You represent injured parties and victims, and you present the case in court.
You had mentioned in a previous episode that you get to partner with your clients. Let's talk a little bit about how Eric Mausner and Mausner Graham partners with their clients to take care of them, to take care of their interests, to help them, in some cases, rebuild their lives after an accident or an injury, because a lot of times those accidents or those injuries are minor, but sometimes they're life altering.
Yeah, I can give you a recent example if you'd like.
Sure,
we have a client who was elderly client struck by a car at a intersection, pedestrian accident. And he fractured his knee, his back, and his shoulder. And he's almost 80 years old. So you can imagine how serious these injuries are in an elderly person. And this is a person who was independent, ambulatory, living his life. and now he's absolutely bedridden. And the problem, Bruce, is he has high blood pressure and pre-existing conditions, aortic dissection, he has a stent in his heart, he has diabetes, he has pulmonary embolisms. There's a lot of conditions that make him difficult to operate on. So he's actually stuck with these injuries because the surgeons can't operate on him until a cardiologist clears him and until he goes under anesthesia tests, because he, I hate to say it, but he could die any second from these injuries or his pre-existing injuries. And if they put him under to have surgery. So this is a kind of a case where it's a little bit more complex. I want to make sure my client's comfortable, right? We want to make sure he has the right treatment, access to doctors. And that's one of the things that we do at Mausner Graham Injury Law. We work closely with our clients from the outset to make sure they have access to healthcare and access to get healthy. I always tell all of our clients, number one thing here is health. Get healthy. Number two is recovering money to compensate you for those injuries. But life is short and health is most important. And I stress that to clients, from the outset.
Do you see that your role is partial attorney, partial doctor, partial psychologist, partial friend? Because it seems like when you're dealing with your clients, you're dealing with a lot more than just what the law says.
Yeah, most lawyers are wearing many hats. You are definitely wearing multiple hats as a personal injury lawyer. I can't take credit for being a doctor, but yes, medicine is part of our profession, part of our focus area here. So you do get fluent with understanding the medicine and doctors and the reports. So over time, it helps, and it helps guiding your clients and making sure they have the right doctors, right? So they can get healthy, get the right answers, get the right evaluations. So yeah, you're analyzing the case from a medical standpoint. Yes, you do play psychologist, you play lawyer, counselor. Sometimes you have to play risk taker too, right? You're always kind of analyzing the case as well. You want to make sure your client nets the most money. You don't want to spend more money than the case is worth. So every case, back to one of your earlier questions, how's it different from being a prosecutor? I was a private attorney who works for money versus a government lawyer. It's an entirely different mindset, right? So you are wearing multiple hats as a personal injury lawyer, but I enjoy that.
When you first meet with a client, what is it that you're trying to accomplish?
I want the client to understand the entire process. I want their expectations to be clear, and I want every question answered at the outset. And I tell my staff that, and I tell the clients about that. Have I answered all your questions? And I might ask that 2 or 3 times on an initial interview. I might ask it during the course of the case or the claim. I want the client to have no confusion at all about this process.
Is it really just a matter of also managing expectations?
Of course, it always is. And we try to do that from the get-go, always.
On future episodes, want to talk about some of the cases that you've taken on, want to talk about the successes that you've had. Have there ever been cases where clients had come to you, you wanted to help them, and you felt there was just no way in the world that you could provide them what they needed?
Yeah, it happens often, unfortunately. And one of those reasons is that there's often there's no insurance. And that's one of the problems in Florida. And every personal injury lawyer will tell you, we don't have good laws here for insurance coverage. And more often than not, you'll see a serious injury or a serious case comes in, and you can't help the client because you can't find a place to recover money. This just happened a month ago. I had another pedestrian accident at an intersection. Somebody got killed, and there was no coverage anywhere. Not from the car owner, not from the driver. There was nothing you could do against these people individually. They were not, they were people of modest means, low income perhaps. There was no way you were going to recover money for the family. So that's an example, and that's something you see all too often in Florida, is the underinsured or the lack of insurance, which prevents you from helping a client.
We'll delve into lack of insurance or no insurance in the state of Florida in another episode. Want to leave with this one question in this episode. When you have a situation where a client or a potential client comes to you and you know that you can't help them, how difficult is it for you? Because a lot of times people look at attorneys as being heartless, being robots, and just looking at money or just looking black and white. That's not the area of law that you practice. So how hard is it on you personally when you know that someone has been injured or harmed and there's nothing that you can do legally that can help them?
It's awful, Bruce. You feel it every time. I'm expressing sympathy to clients and their families often, and I explain the process, but I wear two hats with them. And one, I give them the sympathetic friend approach. And then I tell them, look, I need to put my lawyer hat on for you now, because you hired me to give you an evaluation of this case to help you. You want some separation. So clients kind of appreciate it once I tell them, look, I'm going to change hats right now. And I'm going to give you the facts as they are. And you need the honest, hard facts in your case, because I want clients to understand the situation. And then hopefully that they can learn from the situation. Perhaps they can get better insurance, or they can change their actions or decisions in the future. So perhaps they can learn from it in some way as well.
We're going to get into a lot more about Eric, about his firm, about cases that they take on, and a whole lot more in future episodes. Thanks so much for joining us in this one. 305-344-HERT is the phone number. And you see that going on the ticker throughout the episode. So Eric, we'll catch you in future episodes. We'll talk more about your firm and your career and the cases you take on. He's Eric Mausner. I'm Bruce Silverman. Thanks so much for joining us. We will see you next time.